All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back. So happy to be here one more time. Daniel, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Rocío, and like you, really happy to be back in this space, meeting interesting people, learning about interesting journeys. Who have we
Right.
got with us today?
So today we're going to have Lorena. And Lorena is originally from Argentina, but she's currently living in Canada. And she's going to tell us how she got from Argentina to Canada and why she decided to stay there and everything that happened in between, meaning Costa Rica, and all of those interesting things that she has to share. So welcome, Lorena.
Thank you.
Hi, Lorena.
Hi.
So how are you today?
Great.
Good. It's my lunchtime in Toronto. It's noon, so I'm just relaxing.
All right, great.
Good time slot.
Good stuff. So we've got three completely different time frames. I love that.
Yeah, we are. You're later, right, Daniel? The noon?
It's my 6 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, yes.
Afternoon, evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's morning for me. It's only 10. It's not that early, but it's still morning. So I just had breakfast a little bit ago. So Lorena, tell us about you. How did your process moving countries start? How did you decide to go to Canada? Tell us about Argentina. How were you born there?
I was born in Argentina. I lived there for the first 11 years of my life. So when we moved to Canada, it was not my decision. I didn't really have the option to do so. It was my parents moving with my brother and I. So we moved in 91. I was 11. It was a little bit of a struggle at first. I was a kid. I didn't want to leave my friends. And when I got here, I didn't speak English. In Argentina, it's like, I think, like Canada with French, which is the second language. It's you learn English in school, but you don't learn anything other than like how to say apple and and dog and how are you and my name is. So it was a little bit of a shock, kind of be thrown into the school system, and I came in like half the year, which was also very weird, and it was a little bit of a difficult situation, but I love it now. I grew, it's been over 30 years now that I've spent here. I did do a quick stint in Costa Rica. I moved there for 4 years once I finished university. Great experience. That's how I met you, Chio. I don't know. What else can I tell you?
All right. So being 11, it's a hard age to move, right? You're like changing everything. Everything is changing, and changing countries must be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
How did you adapt? How long did it take you to adapt to the language, to the culture, to just your new routine?
So I think I had an advantage over my brother as an example. So he's 3 years older. So I was 11, he was 14. So for me, it was actually much easier, I think, to learn the language, to adapt in a way, although he adapted in a different way, and I'll explain that. But so it actually didn't take me too long to learn English, which was a huge advantage. I literally took ESL for a year, when typically most people in school, say if you're in high school, you would take it for 3 or 4 years at least.
Yeah.
I just had to take it for a year, and maybe I'm possibly good at languages as well. I have no idea because I only speak the two, but it was super easy for me to learn. So in that sense, it was easy to adapt. And it was interesting because Argentina, their school year is obviously different because of summer and winter. It differs from Canada. So I came into mid-school year, but I was actually half a year ahead of the kids here. So what they were learning, I had already learned. So I remember math specifically. I was like, this is easy. I already know this. Like, I've known this for a year. Come on. So I had that advantage. So it was easy, like language-wise, and even in school to adapt. There are a lot of immigrants in Canada. So I was not the only immigrant in school. So the person I sat beside, who's still my best friend to this day, over 30 years later, is from Slovakia. She only had a year under her belt in Canada. Yeah, so I kind of, we kind of learned things together and adapted together and, grew into the culture together as well. Yeah. So we, even though completely different countries, that experience of being an immigrant and adapting is super similar. Whereas my brother, he was 14, and because he was in high school, it was a different school. And he actually ended up meeting a group of friends that were from Latin America, from all over, like Argentina, Chile, Peru, possibly Guatemala, like all over the world.
Right.
So he actually didn't need to adapt as much because he was with a group of people that with a culture that was very similar.
Right.
And it's interesting because to this day, we're very different. Although, you know, we grew up together in Argentina and grew up together in Canada. I have more, like it's such a weird thing to say, but I feel more Canadian than I do Argentinian and Latin America, because as a kid, the culture, I think it's just like easier for it to imprint.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, and also I had more Canadian friends. Like there was a mix of immigrants there, but none of them were Spanish. I actually didn't have any Spanish or Hispanic friends. Whereas he kind of continued with our culture. So even when we speak English, like I have a very mild accent that will possibly never go away. But if you hear him speak, it's right away, you're like, oh, where are you from? Whereas I feel like with people and with me, you know, it takes like a longer conversation for Canadians specifically to pick up that I have an accent and that I possibly wasn't born here. So it's such an interesting difference there. Although, again, we grew up together, etc. But that school experience totally carved the difference in our cultures. And
that's really interesting, just how a few years and just like little differences can make a huge impact, right? In two siblings living in the same family and growing up in the same house. So that's really interesting. Okay, cool.
It's an experience that quite a few people will have, this moving to a new country and finding a group of friends or circling towards people from your own culture or cultural background. And unfortunately, while it's comforting, unfortunately, it's something that holds you back, perhaps, from integrating further and more quickly into the new culture where you are. Yeah. Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
It's interesting also that you said that you feel a little bit more Canadian than Argentinian. And it's so funny to hear you speak Spanish. When you speak Spanish, you absolutely sound Argentinian. I do have, yes, of course.
My brother doesn't think so. That's also a huge difference when we speak Spanish. It's like if you're Latin America, you're like, oh, he's from Argentina. With me, they're like,
okay, so he might. I've never met your brother.
Sorry,
but you do have a little bit of, well, a big bit of an accent, Argentinian accent. Although you do have some Costa Rican expressions, and I guess that has to do also not only with living in Costa Rica, but living with a partner from Costa Rica. Of course, that's gonna get to you and grow into your accent mixture. But you do feel more Canadian, you said. Now, what do you remember from your life in Argentina? Is there something that you miss, that you still feel like it's not, fully adapted or never went away after moving to Canada?
So there is, although again, I do feel more Canadian, but there are aspects of the Argentinian or maybe even Latin culture that are different that I still somewhat have. So I remember being little, in our neighborhood, like everyone's kind of, everyone helps each other out. We had, as kids grew into like learning, the age of learning how to ride a bike, we had like the communal neighborhood bicycle that would just kind of get like passed down from kid to kid. And, I would learn and be like, oh, well, now he's 4, he's ready to learn. We would pass it down. Like there's a stronger sense of community, I feel.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if it's Argentina or all of Latin America versus, Canada or North America. But there's more of like a familial and even like community strength there that in Canada, and I don't want to speak for all of Canada, but we moved to Toronto specifically, which is a huge city, huge. Like the amount of people just in Toronto is equivalent to the amount of people in all of Costa Rica, just as a contrast. So people are not so much like that. And it's not to say that they're not nice. They wouldn't be there, if you become their friends, close neighbors, etc. They wouldn't be there and wouldn't be, helpful, etc. But I just think that there's so many people that you can't be like that because you can't, be best friends with your 800 neighbors that are literally in like your block, right? So And that is a little, not that I haven't adapted, because my partner, Alejandro, who's from Costa Rica, he's always like, you're so cold. You're so I think I have kind of become more Canadian in that sense, but I do have a little bit of the Latin still there, maybe not as much as someone that lives in Latin America. So I remember, as a kid going out to play, and we would stay out till 11, me and my brother, like literally at like 10 years old. And, if a neighbor saw us, we'd be like, hey, are you thirsty? Do you kids want a snack? Da, da, da. That you don't really see here.
Okay.
More, if an adult offered a kid a snack, that would be a bad sign. Like that's
Right.
not. And you know what? And now that I say that, maybe that's not Canada. Maybe it's just the times. Unfortunately, like times have changed, and it's not safe for kids to be out anymore at that time. I don't know. So it could be a few factors there, I guess. But I do remember that.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The time of night, maybe not so much depending on the country, but accepting snacks from strangers or from neighborhood people, I think that's perhaps more the times. Definitely. Kids here in Spain stay up late. Absolutely. We've got a much later culture. So it's quite typical, especially in summer, for the kids to be out in the park playing at 11 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Yeah, well, where I am at the moment, in the middle of summer, the sun doesn't go down till about 11 at night. So
it was the same in Argentina. So it wasn't 11 at night, dark. It was still light up, but
yeah, right.
All right. What about the weather? I mean, you're from Mar del Plata, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the beach, right? The coast, and I guess you have winter, of course, but nothing compares to Canadian winter, right?
No. So what's interesting? When we first moved here, I didn't have an issue adapting to the weather. I had actually, so in 1991, a month before I left Mar del Plata, it snowed for the first time in over 40 years. I still see articles of it in Facebook when it's November. They're like, "Oh, do you remember 30 years ago when it snowed?" And I'm like, "I do actually. That's the first time I ever saw snow." But that was again, one off in 40 years. So it would get winter there is maybe 8 to 15 degrees. It's nothing compared to the minus 30 that we get in Toronto. As a kid, yeah, minus 40 sometimes also, but minus 30 is standard. It's Canada's only fault, really. I love Canada, but that's the weather in some provinces is insane. But I remember I adapted easily. Maybe it was, being a kid and you're playing in the snow and it's fun and you don't really think of, oh, it's cold, etc. And it wasn't until I came back from Costa Rica those 4 years, I think I got spoiled with that amazing weather. And I came back and I was like, what is happening? Because it's not colder than it was, and when I first moved here. But I think I became unadapted. And when I came back, I was like, whoa, this is like, I'm too old for this. Like I no longer play in the snow. So it's not, it's not as fun. Now I have to get the snow off the car before going to work, shovel the snow. And, snow becomes a whole different thing as an adult.
That's so funny. I'm too old for this. When you talk about age and weather together, that's two things that they don't feel like they should go together. But I remember feeling the same thing when I arrived in England. It's like, no, hold on. Whoa. I'm too old to be dealing with this.
How old were you when you went to England?
Well, in England, it doesn't get nearly that cold. But for me, coming from New Zealand, it was different, and having just everywhere covered in snow and being outside shivering in the snow, and I'm thinking this is not right. It shouldn't be like this. I'm too old for this. Like you say,
it's an uncomfortable feeling.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't feel good to be cold. Yeah.
But I guess it happens with age. It does. It's a fact.
Is it?
And I think as a kid, it's all fun and games, and it's an adventure, and you're enjoying it, and you don't, like you said, you don't worry about it all so much because it's such an adventure and fun.
Yeah.
But at the point where it stops becoming fun and games, it starts to become a bit of a downer. I don't know.
Yeah. But I do think it's a
I don't
fact
know.
that we get less tolerance to extreme weathers, or at least to cold, as we get older. And that's where I think there's also kind of like the cliche of like seniors are retiring into hotter weathers and going to
Yes.
Florida. It's I think it's
I'll
a
be
real
there.
thing.
I'll be there. Or Costa Rica, Florida, Costa Rica. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll be there too. Sounds perfect.
All right. Oh, that's very, very interesting. So, Daniel, do you have any specific questions you want to ask her?
Yeah, I wanted to know, you've mentioned going to Costa Rica a couple of times. Talk to me more about this. How did that come about? When did you go? And you said 4 years. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about Costa Rica.
So that started because actually back when we were still in Argentina and my parents wanted to leave because of the economy, security, bunch of different issues that are still happening, unfortunately. But
Sure.
my dad was big. He loved nature, was a big follower of Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if you know him, but, dating back to the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I grew up
Fantastic.
loving, a lot of people, when I mention that, people are like, who?
Who?
Seriously?
No.
Oh, that's fantastic. The outdoors.
It was like the first real superhero, like for everybody.
I know, but young
Right?
people, if you say that to a 20-year-old, they have no idea who that is.
They didn't know who anybody is.
That's true. You know what? That's true. So when they were deciding to leave Argentina, my dad knew Costa Rica because of Jacques Cousteau and because of his interest in nature and biodiversity and all that fun stuff. So he actually wanted to move to Costa Rica. My mom, on the other hand, although, not that she didn't want to, she just said, Canada, right at the time in the 90s, it was the #1 country in the world. So above the Scandinavian, everything, like it was just #1. It's still very high up, but no longer #1, but still great. So they decided on Canada just because, they said, okay, my brother and I will possibly have a better future, more opportunities, yada, yada. So we came to Canada. A few years later, my parents actually separated, and my dad still had that urge, but always said, I want to visit Costa Rica. I want to get to know it, etc. And he was going through a rough time because of the separation. And, my brother one day said, go on vacation, like take 2 weeks and go see the country you always wanted to see.
Yeah.
So he went,
of course,
supposedly for 2 weeks, and 2 weeks turned into 18 years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
He called us a couple of days before he was supposed to fly back, and he met someone. My dad was like a networker, very chatty, very talkative, and he met someone that worked for it wasn't Tico Times, but at the time there's another tourist, like big tourist publication in Costa Rica in English, CR Times. It was. I don't think it's around anymore. But he met someone that worked there, and they offered him a job. And he said, and in Canada, his job wasn't the greatest. He was, we always kind of struggled a little bit. And he called us and said, I was offered a job. It's a great opportunity. He got to travel all of Costa Rica because it was a tourist magazine. So he would go to hotels for free. All that, like everything was included. His job was to travel Costa Rica and write about the hotels, tours, etc. that he went to. And we said, like, oh my God, like, take me with you, basically. But we couldn't because we were in school. But we were like, of course, like, if you're happy, you have a good job, like, we'll come visit. So that's how my Costa Rica relationship started. So I would always go visit him. When I was in university, we have a good, like, the summer is 4 months that we have off, and then a good month in December. So I would literally go twice a year to visit him and then travel. I love nature. I got that from him. I studied biology and environmental science in university. So I was like, I love it. I'll go vacation in Costa Rica twice a year. And, I have a free place to stay. And then when I graduated, I said, I go there. I spent months already of the year there. Why don't I just move there? So I moved there. The goal was to work in something environment related, but it did take me a couple of years to get my residency. So I couldn't work in what I really wanted to work. So my career took a different turn at the time, but I did work there in something else completely different. But that's how I ended up in Costa Rica. And I was there 4 years. I decided to come back because I was more used to the Canadian, I don't want to say culture, but Canada, in Costa Rica, I remember leaving work late and, you have to be very careful. You have to take a taxi. You have to kind of always
It's not like the way of living in Canada.
A way of living.
Lifestyle.
I started to miss certain things about Canada, or online banking. That Costa Rica didn't have that at the time, and you'd go to the bank and it was a 7-hour affair, and
oh my god, so kind.
After 4 years, that took a toll on me.
Yeah, well, of course, I would totally understand. Although Costa Rica has, made a lot of progress in the last few years. It's surprising.
Sure.
No, but honestly, no, joking aside, it made a huge change in the last couple of decades. Like it went from what she mentions, like being very behind, to now being one of the most advanced countries in, let's say, Central America, at least. Yeah. So yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Now most of the stuff, so I kept my dad's house there. So, and most of the stuff, if you have to pay the taxes, etc., it's all done online from Canada. So it 100% has advanced.
Yeah, it was a huge leap.
I love that. I love that he went there on holiday and landed a dream job that enabled him to live his dream life for I'm not sure how long, but for a number of years, I imagine. That's like one of those little dream drops in the ocean that happen once in a lifetime.
It is. It was a life-changing opportunity for him, for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. He struggled a little bit with the language in Canada, although he was here a few years. As an adult, your accent doesn't go away. That sort of thing. So the job market for him was very limited. So as soon, he went there 2 weeks and he's like, I have an amazing job. Like I got an amazing job offer. So we're like, go for it.
Right. And how old were you guys when he got that job?
He went in 98. So I was 18 and my brother was 21.
All right. Fantastic. Yeah.
And I was living with my mom. My brother was already on his own. So it wasn't, we weren't his dependents. It didn't really affect us. Like we were just happy to see him happy.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So tell us a little bit more about your love for nature. I know you love scuba diving. You've actually been everywhere, or at least to many, many places to do scuba diving. You've traveled around a lot. You've experienced so many different cultures and places. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
So I think that definitely came from my dad. The nature part, Jacques Cousteau, the diving. A very obvious connection there. And then animals like dogs and cats, I remember that's my whole family. So I remember in Argentina, there's a lot of strays, like in Costa Rica and Panama, I guess, as well. And I remember, my mom always, leaving milk out or water or food for the cats, for the dogs, etc. So I just grew up in that. So watching Jacques Cousteau and nature shows and then helping animals, it seems like it's something in my family that I inherited. So the diving started, I actually got certified in Costa Rica. It wasn't a plan to get certified. One day my brother just messaged me and said, he was still in Toronto. He never moved there. And he said, hey, I got my diving certification. It's really cool. Like I saw fish, etc. And we grew up by the ocean in Argentina. So we've always been ocean people. I just had never considered diving. Like I would go snorkeling, etc. Just never really thought of it. And then I was like, hey, that's a great idea. So I got certified in Costa Rica, loved it. My first dive, not even my first dive, it was my first test dive to get the license. It was just 20 feet down. We just kind of, dropped down into the ocean slowly. We kind of like kneeled down on the sand. And then the dive master was like, look, and I look, and there's just 3 sharks at the bottom of the ocean. And I love sharks. Like I know people are like, huh, that's a bad experience. I'm like, no.
I love sharks too. I think they're fantastic.
They are. They're such interesting animals and misunderstood. They're just that's
Hollywood cliches ruined their life.
I know.
Right. They're great.
That one movie that I used to watch all the time as a kid, but now as an adult, I'm like, oh, you've given them such a bad rep. And there are sharks that have attacked, etc., but it's not for the reasons most people think. Like we're not their food. So I remember that moment. That was at least 15 years ago, and it just that's a core memory of mine in my adulthood because I just over and seen 3 sharks. It's just like oh my God, this is amazing. And I remember he showed another woman that was getting certified. He went like this and like, come on, and like tried to grab her hand to pull her. And she was like, no, scared. And I was like, my hand, grab my hand. And he was like, okay. And like, just, we kind of
Different
went
feeling.
over, and
Yeah.
the sharks just swim away. Like they don't care about us. They just like kind of looked at us and were like, oh, you're getting too close, and just swam away.
Absolutely.
That experience was life-changing. And from then, every vacation I take, the first thing I look, I'm like, okay, where can we dive? Is there diving? What is there to see? Because it's so easy, you know, as a tourist, you see everything that's above. You see the culture, you see, you know, the museums, or even the nature above water. But below water, it's a whole different world. Like, we are just so little in this world. Like, it really just makes you realize, like, we're kind of nothing. There's just so much more to the world that we don't see and people don't think about.
You're speaking my language. You really are. It's absolutely. I'm an ocean person. Growing up, I've never dived because I'm not able to, other reasons. But I grew up, when I was growing up, my father had a yacht, and all of our holidays were out on the yacht, sailing off to different islands, exploring different bays, different parts of the country. And so the ocean for me is absolutely as well. I unfortunately am stuck on top of the ocean, but it's something special. And as you said, you know, there's a whole different world out there that most people will never get to see or don't explore. It's something super special.
I didn't know that about you, Daniel, that you were an ocean person. Now I just learned something about you too.
There you go.
That's awesome. And you know, I think it's so magical that you get to experience that world, because I cannot even begin to imagine what it's like down there, right? It's so different, and it must be so unique. So, and I also think you're one of the biggest ocean lovers and what, like, protectors that I've met. So I think it's awesome that you're also sharing. I really admire that.
Do you like the ocean, Chio?
I'm afraid of the ocean a little bit. I grew up in Punta Arenas. I was actually born you know, near the ocean, next to the ocean. The hospital was literally next to the ocean. But I'm a little afraid of it because I cannot swim.
Okay.
So I just get claustrophobic just thinking about being underwater. It freaks me out. But I do love you know, everything that has to do with the ocean. I think it must be protected, and it must be you know, loved a little bit more, because people forget how important it is. And we always think about, like you said, the animals and nature above, you know, but never think about what is below water. And we should maybe do a little bit more of awareness.
And they're just as important, if not more, like to our to human survival. Like, people don't. It's hard to make the connection. I get it, but there's more education is needed on that for sure.
So where have you traveled to explore the oceans?
The oceans. Let's see. Mostly Latin America, just because it's, I feel, well, other than, I'm sure, New Zealand, Australia, Asia, which I haven't been to yet, but one day. Lots of Latin America. So I've done Florida, I guess it's the closest to Canada. Honduras, Roatan is a huge diving hub. Beautiful, beautiful, huge. I remember we saw a few sharks, but more than anything, like huge crabs and lobsters and other things that I'd never seen before. Just very unique environment in Honduras. Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, obviously. And actually, interesting fact. So out of, I still, you know what, divers don't know if it's I've divin or I've dove. Do you know? What's the correct past tense of diving?
To dive, dove.
Dove? Because a lot of people say divin, and there's a debate in the diving world as to which one is correct.
Well, if I would connect it with drive, so it's drive, drove, driven. So I would say dive, dove, divin.
I wouldn't say divin.
No.
No.
See, there's an actual debate.
I mean, technically,
I would say dive, dove.
I've never used it in a sentence, but technically it
and
would
dove.
make sense because they have the same pattern as drive. So I would think that as a teacher, I would consider that a possibility, a high possibility.
Interesting point. Interesting
Yeah.
argument. I would say dive, dove, dove. Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's the dove and driven that people that people are there's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, so interesting fact, the best place I've divin or dove was Costa Rica out of all of them. It's the place where I've seen the most diversity underwater and on top of the water as well, actually. But huge, kind of like the more charismatic animals, right? Like huge, like the manta rays or other types of rays, and the sharks, the turtles, just huge fish that are like, you think it's a shark, but I'm like, no, that's actually some other type of fish. So it's my favorite place to dive. And each time it's different. Each time you dive there, you see a new animal that sometimes I'm like, I didn't even know that was in Costa Rica. I didn't know it was in this part of the world. So interesting, yeah. Every time someone asks me what's the best place out of all the places, I'm like, Costa Rica. You have to.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Really, really
Fantastic.
cool.
And I'm sure New
And
Zealand.
what-
I'll let you know when I go.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've never divin. I don't know. I don't know if try it on. I've never been under that far, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I know there's some fantastic diving in Australia, definitely, and New Zealand also. Yeah. Tell me, what sort of work are you in now, Lorena?
So I work for a charity. So it's a nonprofit that provides supports to people with Parkinson's disease. And
Okay.
I'm in the government relations department. So my role, my portfolio is basically working with the government to ensure that new laws or existing laws serve the health of our community. So the health of those that have Parkinson's or their care partners, that sort of thing. So government relations.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So nothing to do with your nature. The nature side of things, your biology. That's kicked to a hobby.
That's a hobby, unfortunately. So when I moved to Costa Rica, that was the plan.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to because most charities or agencies there that are nature related require either work permit, residency, etc. And it's a weird thing there. So even though you've applied for your residency and it does take 2 to 3 years, now it's maybe less, you can't legally work.
Right.
So I met someone that had a call center in Costa Rica that was American, and he offered me a job, and I was like, oh, so I can't, I don't have my papers. And he's like, well, it'd all be through the US type thing. Like, he's like, people wouldn't even know you're here, etc. So I started working in Costa Rica. Unrelated to nature, it was in sales, but I learned so much. I loved it, actually, and I was there for 10 years. But a few years ago, I decided that because I love nature, and I love even social causes, like supporting, just kind of having a purpose, making a change in the world, as cheesy as that sounds. So I decided to change into the nonprofit world. But ironically, I struggle. I'm not sure I could work, let's say, in an animal shelter or, Greenpeace or Sea Shepherd, that sort of thing, because I think it would kill me.
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
I think I would get compassionate fatigue very, very.
I can see that. Yeah, I can completely understand that.
Yeah. So I do it on a volunteer basis, or even just personally, on my Facebook, I'll share things and, to urge people to get involved somehow. But yeah, I haven't yet, maybe in the future, but right now I don't feel emotionally, in an emotional state to be able to work in something like that.
No, sure. And that makes sense. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of, and not only strength, but I think, you have to get to a point where you just not only love animals, but are able to disconnect your emotions from your brain and just think about their welfare. But it's really hard because when we love animals so much, it's mostly about the heart, right? It's just a pure emotion. So it's really hard. And that's actually how I met you, through all this animal welfare movement in Costa Rica. Yeah. And you do love animals. I mean, you've had all types of pets. You're the only person I know that had a lizard as a pet. I don't love animals that much. But it's you share this interesting experience with the sharks, which I think is amazing. Are there any other experiences that you've had that can be similar to that? Like being close to animals that people don't usually get close to.
Yeah. So another one that the first one that comes to my mind is diving as well, but in Hawaii, there's what they call the manta ray dive. So it's not diving that you're actively moving, but there's areas where manta rays, so the giant rays feed, and it's clockwork every night around 6 p.m. This is where they go feed because there's lots of plankton, or I actually don't remember what they eat. I don't know if I think it's micro shrimp that they eat. So they take you to this spot, and you literally kind of like the shark one. You just, go down to really the bottom of the ocean. It's, again, 20 feet. It's not that deep.
Yeah.
And the rays come to that exact spot and just swim all around you feeding. And they call it the dance of the manta rays. So you literally just kind of kneeling there at the bottom of the ocean with rays just swimming all around you. And like, they'll hit you and, they don't mean to, right? Like, they're not aggressive, but like, their little wings just kind of like brush against you and hit you. And you're just literally there for 40 minutes watching these insanely big animals.
Oh my God.
Do their thing in the wild. And that's why it's so like, not shocking, but it's just so, it just inspires so much awe in me. Because, your day to day, you get up, I have my coffee, I, do my work, and then maybe go to the gym, maybe sit there all night and watch Netflix. And those things, like under those things occur while we're doing like our mundane day to day things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hit you until like you see it, right?
Like it's happening as we speak.
It's happening as we speak. Yes. And that's just one animal in one place. Like that happens worldwide. So many animals that we maybe even haven't heard of. And so it's just, I don't know, it just inspires so much awe in me. And it was also so peaceful because they're so graceful and they swim so slowly and just they flutter their little wings, and it was such an amazing experience.
Oh my God, you're gonna get me into diving. I want to experience that.
Fantastic.
You don't need to know how to swim, Chio. I'll just say that. You need to sink. So
exactly. Oh, Chio. It's all about just sinking. All you gotta do is sink.
It might work out. I think you could do it.
It sounds amazing. It sounds really wonderful. Wow. All right. So Daniel, do you have any final questions to ask her before we let her go?
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, Lorena, and about your stories. You're a real adventurer, and I love it.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you
girl.
so much.
Right.
I also for the invite. I love every time Chio invites me to something. I'm always like, yes, available.
Yes.
It's always fun to have you. You have so much to share, and I really admire you for your passion and for your compassion, for the love that you share. I think it's amazing, not only with animals, but what you do every day, just your job and everything. So I really want to say that I do admire you. And I tell the jackdaw story until today. And I think the jackdaw, I didn't know about the jackdaw story that you shared until today. But I think it's really cool that for us, people growing up in the 80s and the 90s, that somebody like him inspired your dad, and your dad planted that seed into you, and that it grew to the point where you are living your life and still like spreading that legacy that somehow he worked on for so long, right? So I think that's a great message. That's a fantastic example of how teaching with the example is the best way to educate people. So love it.
I love how you phrase that. Thank you. I love that.
All right. Okay, guys. So it's time to say goodbye. I know you have to get back to work, and we don't want to take more of your time. But thank you again for being here. Please, everybody, if you're watching this and you enjoy this conversation, remember to subscribe, share the video, and invite your friends. And if you know somebody that wants to be part of this, please let us know, because we love to meet new people every time. So thank you, Lorena, one more time.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chio. Very nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you too.
enjoy your lunch if you finish or not. But
Enjoy your breakfast.
Okay, all right.
Breakfast or dinner.
And dinner. Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Very good. Bye.